Welcome to the deep dive.
Glad to be here.
Today, we are taking on something, well, massive. We're going to try and reverse engineer the fundamental operating system of one of the most recognized global entities on the planet, McDonald's.
Right. And to be really clear, this is not about the food.
No, the cultural impact, not the advertising, not the hamburger.
Not at all. We've got a huge stack of sources here. Everything from deep franchising studies to, internal case files on their new AI deployments. And the mission for all of it is singular.
To figure out how the machine actually works.
That's it. We're focused purely on the mechanical layer. And think of it like looking at the blueprints for an engine. We want to get past the symbolism of the golden arches and really dive into the infrastructure.
So questions like, how do you maintain control across, 40,000 locations now?
40,000 and counting. And how is that scale enforced? How is it sustained? And maybe the biggest question of all,
why is the system so incredibly resilient?
Exactly. It's weathered decades of economic shifts, culinary trends, you name it. So we are prioritizing precision here. We're looking at the codified systems, the incentives over everything else.
We want you, the listener, to walk away from this with a real shortcut, a way to understand the architecture that allows a simple hamburger stand to become this global financial titan.
And to do that, you have to trace the power.
Logically. So we've broken this down into really 5 interconnected parts. We're going to start with the absolute foundation, the financial anchor, which is the real estate model.
Then we'll move into the control mechanisms, the franchising structure.
From there, the operational blueprint itself, the machine on the factory floor, then the supply chain that feeds it all.
And finally, we'll tie it all together. How do all of those incentives align? Or, just as critically, where do they conflict and how is that managed?
Okay, let's unpack this. And we have to start with this just astonishing fact that at its core, McDonald's isn't really a food company.
It's one of the world's most powerful and successful real estate companies.
And that insight, structurally, is the absolute key to its longevity.
It really is. And the strategy is largely credited to the company's first financial officer, a guy named Harry Sonneborn.
Ray Kroc, the founder everyone knows, was completely obsessed with the operations side. Selling hamburgers, the quality, the speed.
He was the QSC guy. Quality, service, cleanliness. But Sonneborn, he saw the enduring value wasn't in the beef patty.
It was in the ground underneath the restaurant.
Precisely. This isn't just a smart business move. You have to see it as a profound structural pivot for the whole company.
Because the margins on fast food, they're decent, but they're volatile, right?
Incredibly volatile. They're tied to consumer tastes, which change. They're tied to local competition. And they're especially tied to the price swings of raw materials like beef and potatoes.
But the land?
The land is the true, reliable, enduring asset. It's fixed. It generally appreciates over time. And most importantly, it generates a stable, predictable cash flow.
So how did they formalize this? How do they turn this idea into a core part of the machine?
It materialized with the creation of a specific corporate vehicle. It was called the Franchise Realty Corporation, or FRC.
So a whole separate company.
A whole separate company. And the FRC became the legal entity through which McDonald's, the parent corporation, began systematically acquiring and holding property.
And that immediately changes the entire financial profile of the company.
Instantly. It stabilized everything. It massively boosted their financial standing, their profitability, because suddenly they're not just relying on the operational health of a franchisee's food sales. They're not just collecting royalties.
They're a landlord.
They're the landlord.
So let's get into the mechanics of that, because that's where the power really lives.
Yeah.
In a typical franchise model, the franchisor sells a license, they collect a fee, some royalties.
Right, so licensing relationship.
Yeah.
But McDonald's completely flips that power dynamic on its head.
How so?
It concentrates power in 2 distinct ways. Through direct ownership and through, debt. McDonald's, acting through the FRC, either purchases the land outright or, just as often, secures a very long-term master lease on a prime location.
Okay, so they control the parcel of land.
They control the land. Then they often finance and construct the actual building, and then they turn around and sublease the entire property, the land and the building, to the franchisee, the owner-operator.
Wow, okay, so that single action, it changes everything.
Everything. The corporation isn't just a franchisor you send a royalty check to. They are your indispensable, enduring landlord. You operate your business inside their asset.
So the franchisee is, they're leveraged in multiple ways at once.
That's it. You're an operator, so you have to adhere to all the brand standards, the QSC, all of that. But you're also a tenant. And you have to adhere to the strict terms of your lease.
Which guarantees that steady, reliable income stream for the corporation.
Yeah.
It's a floor for their revenue that has almost nothing to do with how many Big Macs are sold on a rainy Tuesday.
Exactly. But here's the real question. If the franchisee technically owns their local business, how does the corporation exert such almost total control without going through the legal mess of dissolving a franchise agreement? Where does the rubber meet the road on that leverage?
What's the real threat?
It's the simple, brutal superiority of their financial position. The corporation holds the deed or the master lease. The franchisee, meanwhile, has invested, in many cases, millions of dollars of their own capital into equipment, signs, fixtures.
All of which is installed on property they do not own.
Under a lease that is, by its very nature, terminable. If you breach the operational standards laid out in your franchise agreement, you are simultaneously violating the terms of your lease.
And you can be evicted.
You can be evicted, and the corporation gets to keep the appreciating physical asset. They just slot in a new compliant operator. It massively reduces the traditional risk for the franchisor.
That is a profound structural advantage. Okay, so let's talk about the money itself, the structure of that lease payment. I'm guessing it's not just a simple flat rent every month.
No, that would be too simple. And frankly, it would be too limiting for them. The leasing model is innovative because it both reinforces this power dynamic and it aligns the financial incentives.
How do they do both?
Okay, so franchisees pay rent based on let's call it a sophisticated combination of two elements. First, there's a fixed base rent agreement.
That's the floor. Guarantees minimum revenue for the corporation, totally non-volatile.
Correct. But the second part is the accelerator. It's a percentage of their gross sales, which kicks in once certain predetermined sales targets are met.
Wait a second. If you're a franchisee and you know a percentage of every dollar you make above a certain point goes straight to your landlord, doesn't that disincentivize you from innovating or pushing for that extra growth? You're sharing all the upside.
It could, but the structure is actually designed to offset that exact friction. By guaranteeing their own income with the base rent, the corporation is stable. But by taking a percentage of gross sales, they get to participate directly in the franchisee's success.
So they have a vested interest in making that franchisee succeed.
Yeah. A powerful, direct financial interest. Suddenly, the corporation is highly motivated to create incredibly effective national advertising campaigns, to design more efficient operating systems, to build streamlined supply chains.
Because all of those things drive the franchisee's gross sales up.
Which in turn drives the corporation's rental income up. The corporation's profit scales directly with the success of its tenants. It's a foundational example of what they internally came to call the what's in it for we philosophy, WhyItTV.
That dual mechanism, the fixed floor and the percentage ceiling, it just locks the two parties together financially. And this real estate power, it's also the primary tool for enforcing standardization in the physical world.
Oh, absolutely. The control literally lives in the lease agreement itself. It dictates location specifications. It dictates adherence to brand standards.
So if a franchisee decides on their own, you know what, I'm going to repaint the store blue, or I'm going to reconfigure the kitchen for a new menu item.
They're not just violating a brand guideline, they're violating the legal terms of their tenancy. They're risking eviction from their core business asset.
It's an incredibly rigid system. But our sources do point out that this is where the system sometimes hits a wall. It runs into an even higher power.
Local government.
And jurisdictional zoning requirements.
Yes. The corporate system is absolutely designed for uniformity, but it has to structurally bend when it's directly constrained by the highest legal authority in a given area, which is almost always local planning and zoning. And we see this in a few famous, highly regulated places.
One everyone points to is Sedona, Arizona, the teal arches.
Exactly. Sedona have incredibly stringent municipal design codes. They're meant to preserve the visual harmony of that unique red rock landscape.
So the iconic gold and yellow was a non-starter.
The local McDonald's was required by law to swap the yellow for a specific shade of teal to visually blend in with the prescribed color palette of the town. The entire building, in fact, conforms to the local sandstone aesthetic. It's a really stunning visual.
And it perfectly represents that boundary condition. Corporate specification being overridden by local law.
And there's an even more profound example in Santa Fe, New Mexico. The historical zoning ordinance there requires that all buildings in the historic district conform to the traditional Pueblo revival style.
Which means what? Rounded adobe-like walls, earthy colors.
Wooden beams, the whole aesthetic. And McDonald's has to adhere to it just like everyone else.
What's so fascinating about these examples, though, is that they don't actually weaken the system.
Not at all. They just mark the boundaries. The corporation maintains absolute control over its architecture everywhere, unless it's directly superseded by law. These exceptions don't undermine the resilience of the model.
Because the underlying power, the ability to choose the site, finance the building, and most importantly, own the deed, that all remains centralized with the FRC.
Correct. The real estate layer is the structural defense. It provides unmatched financial stability and leverage.
Okay, so you have the FRC and this innovative leasing model as your ultimate defense, providing stability and leverage, but you still need to manage thousands of people running the day-to-day operations.
That's the other side of the coin.
Right. And that brings us to Section 2, the mechanics of franchising. How do you achieve that operational control without actually owning the labor?
Well, when Ray Kroc first started formalizing the franchising model that the McDonald brothers hadn't really scaled, his initial philosophy, it seems almost naive now, given the behemoth it became.
What was it?
Our sources all describe Kroc's approach as being genuinely focused on making the franchisees successful first. He wasn't trying to maximize immediate corporate profits by charging huge predatory upfront fees.
Why was that so structurally important? I mean, the temptation must have been to just charge the maximum fee you could get.
Because Kroc was playing the long game. He was focused on scale and, crucially, loyalty. He believed in being transparent, in providing detailed financial information and real support. He wanted to cultivate a community of owner-operators who felt truly invested in the system's success.
That created deep, long-term alignment.
Yes, but, and this is a huge but, that commitment was always strictly balanced by an absolute non-negotiable requirement for adherence to operational standards.
And those standards were codified into the famous triad, the QSC principles.
Quality, service, and cleanliness, that was the deal. Kroc's operators, the franchisees, they controlled QSC with obsessive detail, and that ensured uniformity. Meanwhile, Sunborn's team controlled the real estate and the finance. Is a two-pronged system.
The QSC mandate is what enforces uniformity, which is what delivers customer predictability. That's the core value proposition of the entire brand.
It is, but the system was also consciously designed with a very specific and limited degree of flexibility. And the sources are clear this was crucial to preventing stagnation.
Meaning the franchisees had some independence to innovate.
Some, yes, but, and this is key, only within a framework that ensured the innovation could be universally standardized later if it proved successful.
And that strategic balance is what gave us some of the most iconic menu items, which are now completely central to the brand.
The Big Mac, the Egg McMuffin.
Both of those came from franchisees, not from a corporate test kitchen.
That's right. This is a critical structural insight. The system allows for decentralized creativity, but it only permits that creativity to be adopted across the board if it passes the test of universal standardization and scalability.
So the franchisee effectively acts as a low-risk R&D lab for the entire global network.
A perfect description. It shows the corporate structure is rigid enough to maintain consistency, which is paramount, but flexible enough to capture and scale local genius.
Let's turn to the financial structure of that relationship, beyond just the rent we talked about. The obligations are pretty comprehensive. They're multi-layered.
And they all serve to fund the centralized machine. First, franchisees have to pay a substantial one-time franchise fee. That's your ticket in.
But that's not the big cost, is it?
No. More significantly, they have to cover all the initial investment costs for everything inside the building. All the equipment, the signs, the seating, the tech infrastructure. That capital outlay can be enormous.
And that ties them heavily to the operational success of that one specific unit.
Of course. And then you have the ongoing obligations. We already covered the rent and the percentage of sales structure. But then you have royalties.
Which is a separate percentage of gross sales paid directly to the corporation.
Correct. And on top of that, there are the mandatory advertising fees. This is another percentage of gross sales, and it's non-negotiable.
And that money goes into cooperative advertising funds. This feels like another part of that WhyItFW, that what's in it for we idea.
It's a perfect example. It ensures that regardless of how one individual market is doing, there is a constant, substantial, and shared pool of capital.
And that pool funds two different things at once.
Two synchronized activities. First is centralized brand support, the big national TV campaigns, the overall branding strategy. But second, it funds decentralized local promotion experimentation.
So the local co-ops, which are funded by everyone's fees, can experiment with a new promotion, a regional menu item.
And if it's successful, if it works, it can then be scaled up and rolled out nationally or even globally.
So the local promotion is funded by the whole system, but it acts as a low-risk testing ground. The entire network gets access to that adaptive intelligence.
It structurally reinforces the system's ability to adapt regionally while still maintaining that massive national presence, which gives them huge bargaining power in media buys and with the supply chain.
But we have to acknowledge the friction here, this duality, this split. It must have caused problems.
It did. As the system exploded in the 60s and 70s, that structural split between Croc's focused QSE operations and Sunborn's focus maximizing real estate profits, it became a real source of instability.
That's a fundamental disagreement at the very top.
Yeah.
Operations versus finance.
And it eventually led to these big bureaucratic structures replacing the old informal handshake deal style of management. Croc saw the mission as selling the best, cleanest food possible. Sunborn saw the mission as maximizing the return on investment on the property portfolio.
That tension seems inevitable when you split the core asset from the core operation like that.
And that internal tension eventually bubbled up and became external unrest. Our sources point to a period in the mid-1970s where franchisee dissatisfaction just grew exponentially.
Why? What was the complaint?
The operators felt they lost that direct line to top management that Croc had always fostered. They believed the real estate focus, the FRC, was starting to supersede the operational focus. They felt the system was prioritizing corporate revenue over their own profitability.
And the corporation's response to this was characteristically a structural one.
Purely structural.
Yeah.
They didn't just issue apologies or make symbolic gestures. They institutionalized the communication channels. They created a formal pressure valve.
This is when they established the National Operators Advisory Board, the NOAB.
Exactly, to ensure franchisees had formal representation on key issues. And they also introduced an ombudsman role to handle complaints more effectively.
The NOAB is such a critical piece of system governance. It's a formal conflict resolution mechanism.
It's an admission that the system had grown too large and too complex for informal trust to maintain alignment anymore.
And its purpose isn't just advisory, is it?
No, it's a structural body. It's designed to ensure franchisee input is heard and to maintain the reality of equity and collaboration. It was a way of reinforcing Croc's original partnership philosophy inside a much larger, more financially controlled system.
It allows the system to absorb all that internal pressure without actually fracturing. It keeps the corporate landlords and the operating partners aligned, even when their day-to-day priorities might be structurally different.
It's a continuous structural adjustment, and that's vital for the long-term stability of any massive decentralized network like this. It guarantees the C-suite is constantly exposed to the operational reality on the front line.
Okay, so we understand the financial foundation, which is the real estate. We understand the complex governance structure of the franchising mechanics. Now let's get to the core of the machine itself. The rigorous, relentless operational standardization that makes a McDonald's a McDonald's, no matter where you are in the world.
This is the blueprint for execution.
And that blueprint dates all the way back to 1948.
Long before Ray Kroc ever entered the picture, it was the McDonald brothers' own radical innovation, the speedy service system.
And this wasn't just about making food differently. It was about changing the entire architecture of food service.
It was a radical act of pure operational engineering. The sources are amazing on this. The McDonald brothers closed their already highly profitable restaurant for 3 entire months.
Just to retool everything.
A testament to their commitment to optimization over immediate profit. The whole transformation was based on ruthless streamlining.
They looked at their own sales data.
And they had this incredible realization. Hamburgers, fries, and milkshakes accounted for a staggering 87% of all their sales.
So their response was just radical simplification.
They slashed the menu. From 25 items down to just 9, they focused only on the high-volume, high-efficiency items that they could produce quickly and consistently.
Because eliminating that complexity is the absolute key to achieving speed and focusing on quality. They literally threw out grills and plates.
Replaced them with specialized hamburger assembly stations. And critically, they eliminated car hop service entirely. They switched to a self-service counter model.
The elimination of car hops seems so simple, but it's structurally profound.
It is. It reduced complexity, it eliminated the need for specialized tipped labor, and most importantly, it removed the human element of service customization.
No more special orders.
The customer comes to the window, places a standard order, gets it quickly. The entire establishment was redesigned to function less like a restaurant and more like a manufacturing production line. an assembly line for food.
And this emphasis on process design, this is what laid the groundwork for what sociologist George Ritzer famously termed McDonaldization.
Exactly. Ritzer's framework is really the global operating code for this entire system. It's built on 4 key principles of rationalization that have come to define not just fast food, but much of the modern consumer experience.
Efficiency, calculability, predictability, and control. Let's start with efficiency. How does the system define that and, more importantly, achieve it?
Efficiency is just the optimal means to a defined end. And here, the end, the goal, is serving the customer as quickly as possible.
So everything is designed around that one goal.
Every single thing. It manifests in streamlined service processes, highly specific store layouts, kitchen workflows designed explicitly for fast throughput and minimal wasted movement. The worker's every motion is choreographed.
Like a dance.
Absolutely. The design of the kitchen equipment, the placement of the fryers, the location of the condiment guns, it's all optimized for minimal steps to minimize errors and maximize the speed of production.
And the training reinforces this.
The rigorous uniform training programs, which often use step-by-step pictorial guides or now, digital simulations, they ensure these efficient processes are learned and adhered to globally. The worker is integrated into the efficient machine.
Okay, principle number 2, calculability.
This is where the system deliberately shifts the emphasis away from subjective quality like how good does this burger taste and toward quantifiable metrics, things you can count.
So quantity over quality, in a sense.
Or at least an emphasis on quantity as a form of quality. The focus is on size and speed. Think about the name Quarter Pounder. It's a perfectly quantified selling point. You know exactly what you're getting.
And the emphasis on speed, the time it takes to serve a customer.
Which we're about to quantify in a big way. The low price point, like the dollar menu, is also a calculability play. It's about the sheer amount of food you receive for a fixed low cost. Even the workers are managed by metrics. Burgers per minute, time to mop the floor. It's all about the numbers.
Which brings us to predictability. This is the system's ultimate promise to the customer. It's the foundation of brand trust.
Predictability is the absolute assurance that the product and the service will be functionally identical no matter where you are or when you're there.
An Egg McMuffin in Toronto today should be the exact same as one in Tokyo next year.
The exact same product, prepared in the exact same way.
Mm-hmm.
And that standardization is achieved through these incredibly rigorous preparation procedures, cooking times, temperatures, exact ingredient measurements. But it even extends to the worker's behavior.
The communication norms, Ritzer calls them McNorms.
Right. A McDonald's employee in, say, Budapest will interact with a customer using the same established scripts, the same cadence of interaction that governs service in Buenos Aires.
The environment itself is engineered
to be an island of safety and stability. It offers comfort in knowing there will be no surprises in the experience. The elimination of surprise is what builds that global brand loyalty.
And the fourth and final principle, control, is how that repeatability is mechanically enforced across the entire system.
Control is achieved primarily through that process design we talked about, the standardized equipment, the training, and now increasingly through technological intervention.
The goal is to enforce repeatability
and minimize any variation introduced by the human element or by, a local manager's discretion. The physical store architecture itself is a control mechanism. The layout channels customer movement and worker activity, ensuring those efficient processes can't be easily circumvented.
This systematic blueprint brings us right into the modern era. Technology is now optimizing and enforcing this blueprint with just unprecedented precision.
This is where the machine gets its modern edge. We have clear, quantifiable impact data from early pilots, we're talking hundreds of restaurants, detailing how AI is optimizing the final few seconds of every transaction.
Take the drive-thru.
Perfect example. The deployment of AI-driven solutions to manage order queues and timing has decreased the average service time by exactly 27 seconds.
27 seconds. I mean, that sounds almost obsessive. It sounds tiny.
Yeah.
Why chase those last few seconds so hard? Does it really translate to that much revenue?
Because of scale and throughput. This is calculability applied directly to revenue. A 27-second reduction in service time, that translates to roughly a 10% increase in hourly car throughput.
So you could serve 10% more cars during your busiest hours.
Exactly. And if you annualize that increased throughput, it adds up to roughly $65,000 in additional annual revenue per store.
And you multiply that by tens of thousands of drive-thrus globally.
The savings and the revenue gains become astronomical. The optimization is directly tied to revenue generation at scale. The AI isn't just cool tech. It's about monetizing the final constraints of the physical process.
And it improves accuracy, too.
Massively. The use of sophisticated voice AI for order taking has achieved reliability up to 93% in these pilot programs. And that's critical because that increased accuracy boosts guest satisfaction scores by an average of 12 points.
And it cuts down on waste.
It simultaneously trims remake costs, all the money you lose when an order is made wrong and has to be thrown out. Accuracy and speed are the fundamental, measurable expressions of the system's core principles.
Even the maintenance of the machines themselves is being rationalized by AI.
Which extends the life of the assets that the FRC owns. Predictive maintenance, for instance, has cut unplanned equipment outages by 60%. This is pure asset management optimization.
And the savings.
An estimated $35 million across the system. And in one really specific, quantifiable example, it extends the operational life of a key asset like the high-volume fryer by 15%.
And all of this is enabled by a specific technology layer, edge computing. For someone who's not in tech, why is edge computing so essential for this?
Edge computing is how you scale efficiency in a decentralized way. In a global network like this, latency, the delay in sending data to a central cloud server and getting a response back latency is a killer for real-time operations like a drive-through AI.
So you can't have the AI in California making a decision for a store in Paris. It's too slow.
Way too slow. So by partnering with companies like Google Cloud, McDonald's deploys smaller, localized processing power at individual restaurant locations. That's the edge.
So the data processing, the thinking, happens right there in the building.
Yes. This local processing reduces that network latency to almost zero. It speeds up the real-time response of the AI solutions. If the AI is deciding the optimal order to call out to the kitchen staff based on the car queue, that decision has to be instant.
Edge computing ensures the control mechanism, the AI, remains immediate and effective at the store level.
It makes the global system feel fast and responsive to local conditions. The optimization loop is just relentless.
But none of this works, no matter how efficient the kitchen is.
Yeah.
If the raw materials are inconsistent, if the potatoes are different sizes or the beef isn't uniform, the entire promise of predictability just collapses.
And that brings us to the fourth structural pillar, the supply chain architecture.
Which is built on a philosophy that is very different from a typical buyer-seller relationship.
It consciously moves away from that. It's not a transactional model where the relationship is purely price-driven. McDonald's insists on long-term partnerships that are focused on achieving McDonald's key business outcomes. It's a model known as vested outsourcing.
The sources describe this as a shift, away from a what's in it for me mindset to a deep outcomes-focused partnership. So what does vested outsourcing demand from a supplier that a normal contract doesn't?
It demands total shared accountability. The supplier has to agree to assume full responsibility for meeting McDonald's incredibly exacting quality standards, standards that are often proprietary and significantly higher than the industry average.
And the key structural effect of that
Is that it allows the restaurant staff, the owner-operators, to focus solely on customer service. On the front door, they don't have to worry about the back door. They don't have to check the quality of the lettuce or verify the weight of the patties.
They just trust the standardized system and that vested supplier partnership.
They trust the system. So if there is a quality failure, it's the supplier who has an enormous multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract at stake who bears the primary consequence and responsibility.
Which encourages them to invest very heavily in their own quality control.
Absolutely. The vested model creates that WhyItTV scenario again. Suppliers are incentivized to make huge capital investments in quality assurance, in new processing technologies, because they're driven by a strong desire to grow and succeed alongside McDonald's.
They know their long-term profitable contract depends not on winning the next bid on price, but on achieving McDonald's systemic quality outcomes today.
Right. And the goal is never just get me the cheap ingredients. It's system-wide optimization. The pricing protocols are incredibly transparent. They're structured to show the trade-offs on the total system cost, not just the marginal price of one ingredient. For example, a supplier has to weigh the savings of cheaper raw potatoes against the potential penalty of higher transport costs or the cost of a recall if the quality varies.
It forces a holistic view. You have to minimize the total system cost and risk, not just lower the transaction price of a commodity.
And this all goes back to Kroc. His early work was pivotal in setting this tone, establishing these rigorous standards for suppliers that ensured quality from the source. It set them apart from competitors who just didn't have those integrated checks.
This commitment to standardization also required some massive technological shifts in the supply chain itself.
The most famous one, of course, was the transition from fresh to frozen products. And that all started with the French fries.
Championed by the supplier J.R. Simplot.
That's right. And that transition seems simple, but it required an absolutely astronomical investment.
You needed a whole new infrastructure.
A global cold chain.
Yeah.
It demanded massive capital outlay in cold storage facilities, specialized processing plants, a fleet of refrigerated transport, but the payoff was profound.
It streamlined the global supply chain.
And enabled unprecedented efficiency, consistency, and scale. It guaranteed that the supply chain could keep pace with the company's aggressive expansion while ensuring the exact same quality and texture of a French fry in Miami as in Madrid. It's predictability, enforced by technology.
And the global architecture is designed for resilience, too, especially against market volatility.
The system enhances its own resilience by moving toward vertical integration in key segments.
So owning more of the supply chain themselves.
Or at least controlling it through long-term exclusive partnerships. Owning stakes in livestock operations, in distribution centers. This structural move is designed specifically to avoid volatility in raw material prices and to maintain a tight grip on both cost and quality from the farm all the way to the fryer.
So if the price of beef futures suddenly spikes because of a global shortage,
McDonald's is structurally cushioned. They have a tighter, more direct control over the source, which effectively insulates their entire global franchise network from that short-term market chaos.
that stability gets passed down to the franchisees through consistent negotiated pricing.
Precisely. They control the source and the process, which minimizes the uncertainty that plagues so many other food businesses.
And for their international expansion, they use a fascinating strategy the sources call backward linkages. This seems critical for getting into new, diverse markets.
Backward linkages are when McDonald's actively develops the capabilities of local suppliers in international markets, like India or China, instead of just trying to import all their materials, which is incredibly expensive and often politically difficult.
They build the local supply chain themselves.
They act as a catalyst. They promote entrepreneurship in the host countries. They literally teach local firms how to meet global quality standards. They aren't just demanding quality, they are building the infrastructure necessary to deliver that quality.
Which ensures they get the quality and the supply redundancy they need for expansion.
Correct. By creating that local capacity, they solve their immediate supply problem, they establish deep local economic roots, and they create long-term goodwill in the host country. It's the WhyItTV principle applied globally. It's long-term systemic thinking embedded in the very structure of the organization.
Okay, this brings us to our final and really our overarching section. How do all these different layers, the real estate, the franchising, the operations, the supply chain, how do they actually align their incentives to form this one enduring, self-reinforcing system that can operate on a global scale?
At the end of the day, the endurance of the entire system is rooted in the consistent application of that what's in it for we, that why I we philosophy. It's a rejection of the zero-sum belief that for the corporation to win, the franchisee or the supplier has to lose.
So let's break down how that WII thinking connects the three core pillars we've analyzed. Let's start with the Franchise Realty Corporation and the operator.
Okay, so we establish that the corporation's financial success comes from its real estate holdings and collecting that fixed base rent. But to maximize its profit, it needs that variable revenue, the percentage of gross sales it collects as royalties.
So the corporation is structurally forced to care deeply about the operational success of every single franchisee.
They have to. The franchisee needs the corporation's powerful brand, its standardized system, its real estate leverage, but the corporation needs the franchisee's thriving sales volume to hit its own profit goals. They are financially locked together by that innovative leasing model. It creates mutual dependency.
And the vendor relationship, the vested outsourcing model, flows from that same shared vision.
Absolutely. The suppliers aren't just interchangeable contract fillers, they're treated as partners. They're encouraged, even required, to make these substantial, costly investments in quality and new tech like the cold storage for frozen fries because they are driven by this explicit desire to grow their business alongside McDonald's.
Guaranteed by that long-term partnership agreement.
It's shared vision, shared risk, and shared reward. McDonald's creates an environment where vendors are actually eager to respond to their demanding specifications because the reward is massive, sustainable scale and market dominance. The alignment is built right into the cash flow.
But the core operation has to be standardized globally, yet the system also has to achieve market penetration in these wildly diverse cultures. That demands a mastery of what's often called glocalization.
Glocalization is the necessary structural compromise. It's the balance between absolute standardization and simple market survival. The entire operational system, the QSC principles, the service flow, the efficient kitchen blueprint, the AI implementation, that is all standardized globally,
It's codified in things like the Mixmap Operational Manual.
which dictates global standards for physical structure, for process uniformity. The method has to be rigid and universal. A regional director touring a kitchen in Beijing should find it functionally identical to one in Chicago. That method guarantees predictability. That's the core promise.
The menu, the actual product, that is allowed to be highly localized.
To meet specific religious, ethnic, and just general taste demands, this product adaptation is the system's flexibility layer. And the examples are just fascinating.
In India, for instance.
In India, they entirely eliminate beef and pork to cater to Hindu and Muslim dietary restrictions. They had to introduce items like the McVeggie burger and the chicken Maharaja Mac. These are products that require entirely different supply chains than their Western counterparts, but they're still executed using the same standardized QSC procedures,
And in the Middle East, they have the McArabia.
which uses folded pita bread instead of the standard bun. In Japan, they introduced the ebi fileo, a shrimp patty sandwich, to align with the local preference for seafood.
Even in Europe, they adapt.
In Germany, McDonald's sells the Nuremberger, which is a mini bratwurst sandwich. In France, they offer a croque McDou, which is their take on the classic French croque monsieur.
This dual approach is, frankly, ingenious. You have global operational control paired with local product flexibility.
The rigid, standardized process allows them to execute these complex, locally tailored menu items with the same speed and efficiency required by the QSC principles. It lets them achieve market penetration without sacrificing their core system predictability.
And pricing, too, is localized. The Big Mac Index shows us that.
Right. Pricing is a function of localization, not globalization. The integrity of the brand is maintained globally through the consistent process, but the specific ingredients and the price point adapt locally.
It's the ultimate expression of the system's resilience. The mechanical structure is rigid and universal, but the outer shell is flexible enough to absorb global variance and cultural requirements.
It's a structurally designed solution to the problem of global scale. And that's why the enduring nature of this system stems not just from branding or culture, but from its fundamental mechanical design. It's the separation and reinforcement of those three layers: the stability of the real estate model, the control of the franchising structure, and the resilience of the vested supply chain.
So we've really analyzed this system as a coherent, self-adjusting machine. It persists because the incentives, the governance structures like the NOAB, and the operational standardization, now augmented by this precision AI, are all constantly reinforcing each other.
The stability of the operation is leveraged by the permanence of the property. It creates a virtuous and nearly unbreakable loop.
And that, I think, is the most profound insight we've uncovered here today.
It is. The real estate model's ability to function almost entirely separate from the volatile food market is what provides that core corporate financial stability. It doesn't matter if menu tastes evolve or new competitors emerge. That financial bedrock allows the rest of the operational system the freedom to constantly refine itself.
Which raises an important final question, something for you to consider long after this deep dive is over.
Yeah.
If McDonald's were structurally forced somehow to divest all of its real estate holdings, if it could no longer rely on rent for its core revenue, what would be the single mechanical feature of standardization that would allow the brand's fundamental predictability to survive?
Would it be the QSC principles alone? Or would it be the purely process-driven automation now enforced by AI that ensures that standardized experience?
Something to mull over the next time you see those golden arches.